Good afternoon. 3 o'clock, Friday, May 10th. We're calling the May Sagaponic Zoning Board of Appeals meeting to order. And our first order of business is the Pledge of Allegiance. Please join me. Pledge of allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay. For the record, I was not physically present at last month's meeting. I observed by Zoom but did not participate. However, I have read the minutes of the April meeting, which enables me to participate in this meeting with respect to the old business items that were covered at that meeting. So the other members of the board, have you had an opportunity to review the minutes?
Yeah, you read.
Okay, make a motion to approve. Richard,
I'll second.
second, all in favor? Aye. I want to thank Merrilee for having conducted the meeting last month. And we're going to let her continue on those items that she was attending to last month. Whether she gets here, she can pick it up. In the meantime, the first item of old business is the application of Krumholtz on 119 Sand Dune LLC, and the address of the same. I see that Wayne is here and ready to go, so you may take the floor.
Thank you. Good morning. Good afternoon, board members. William Berlin from State Marcus and doing on behalf of Krumholtz 119 Sand Dune LLC. This application was heard a couple months ago. It was adjourned for all purposes. There were several comments raised by both the board and the neighbors. In the ensuing months, we took that opportunity to try to reach out to our neighbors and get further input. We have also engaged in prepared revised plans. Hopefully it addresses the concerns of the neighbors and the boards. In particular, I'll have our architects come up and actually walking through the revised plans. Generally, the comments that we had heard at the time, as you know, this proposal is to renovate an existing house and expand, which was subject of a town wetland permit. Because of wetland constraints, it's restricted us to basically the easterly portion of the property towards the street. The comments we received from our neighbors to the northwest and north were that a proposed roof deck on this building was too large, and that we should either relocate it east or west. There was some competing comments in that regard. There was also a comment that we got from one of the neighbors that if it was to occur, maybe it should be relocated to the south of the roof. We also received comments that the configuration of the rear stairways was not pleasing to our neighbors. And, they were the charges that the architects were asked to examine. Before I get to that, though, one of the reasons this board adjourned was also because there is a section of your zoning code that particular that allows the planning board to grant relief where wetlands impact the property and a wetlands permit has been issued for that project. In such case, we request the board.
With what?
They heard that, and then this isn't at this time hasn't made a decision.
I want to just get normal Zoom with it.
We want to proceed at this time and have that in case the village board sees that they don't want to exercise that discretion for any reason, in which case it would mean this board would have to address the setback variances, which are the two front yard setback variances. We just asked that, as we did in our petition, that you take notice of the legislative recognition that relief should be granted in terms of the wetlands, that was in our petition, and we would ask you to consider that when we talk about the two front yard setbacks. Just a little more background also, I think we presented this, but it's important. We started this application in 2020 when the client purchased the property. We made applications to the town environment division to have wetlands identified, and we started applications which Marty Shea asked us to consider, among other things, a variety of alternatives, shifting the building and the like. But another comment that came up, which we pointed out to the board, was that this was a legal 3-story building, and for us to do any work on the property would require full compliance to FEMA. And in which case, the question of lifting that 3-story building would exceed your height variances, setbacks or requirements. And we were advised of the various cases this board had recently considered on those height variances. And so, which case the building inspector encouraged us to modify our plan and work with Marty Shea, such as to lop off the 3rd story and try to incorporate that space in the lower 2nd floor, which case the habitable space would all comply to your height requirements. The only height variance we're asking for is 2.5 feet because of the railing that would surround the roof deck. I'd ask John or Brian from Laffey's to basically talk about the plan, the change to the plans, and then I want to talk more about the legal tests that we have to be addressed.
That you want me to be displayed?
So, yeah, that'd be great.
What am I?
You can announce it. So my name is John Laffey, architect, my associate Brian. The architect is Chris Combs.
You want to put on the screen, or do you want to refer to what plan are you looking
You're
for?
8A 1.1?
And they don't.
So, we got the notes from the legal advice and heard the client's request to make some modifications, but they have a number of other areas. And, we're going to move the stairs, which were in an equally fashion on the project. We're starting here on the 1st floor, on the upper left-hand side, you see a new set of 1st floor stairs. That used to be the old deck, and onto that bedroom. That would now change into a set of stairs.
So that's the north side of the building.
That's correct.
Northwest corner.
The northwest corner of the property. So that's the new set of stairs. And then if you go to the 2nd floor, that's on sheet A 1.2. There we are. Yeah. You'll see those stairs now in the northeast corner. And we have those stairs we get pointed out, and they go through a walkway that now leads to the new set of stairs, which are currently located towards the westerly side of the site. Whereas in the old scheme, with the old stairs, they're located on the westerly side of the north side of that, the upper building. You have it all. The original plans, yes.
Sorry, I'm having trouble following.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No problem.
Yeah. So, we started with the original plan had the stairs on the northwest
That is correct.
corner, right?
That's
They've now been removed from that corner
correct.
and relocated to basically the middle of the north side.
Well, more towards the west side of the city. Yes, that's correct.
Okay. So the elevation, by the way, we are the zoning board of appeals. We're not the architectural historic review board. And the architecture of the structure, while of interest to us, is not technically part of our jurisdiction. So, but we are interested in the efforts that you have made to ameliorate the effect of the property on the adjacent properties, which has to do with what is within our jurisdiction, is the relief that you're requesting, the height. So I am interested in hearing how you made that adjustment.
Right, just as, I don't know if you can see this stairs
Yeah.
located here, original.
Yeah.
Now they're located on this side of that.
Right,
Same-
more
same
to the
footprint.
east.
That's very much correct.
It's still the northwest one. Correct.
No, not anymore, not anymore. Now the stairs.
So is this a better perspective, the 3D perspective? you want? This is 3D perspective.
Yeah.
Second line.
And that's A2.
A2.3.
You got it.
Explain the terminology or else we'll follow.
Rich, the elevations that you have at the A2-3 drawing. Yeah, and also A24 gives you the elevation and perspective, so how we can see that it's, I mean, on the northerly elevation, how the stairs are configured. That might be a better view for the neighbors. They're here, they can choose here.
I was gonna ask if the elevations shown.
You think that would be easier?
Much easier.
I agree, and so if you can show the northerly elevation, it would be easier to conceptualize how the stair configurations change. Yeah, that's good. Okay, so instead of that zigzag approach that you had before,
That is
in
good.
fact, that they said looked like a motel.
Still
No,
looks like a
no,
hotel.
no, it's the office.
Looks like same motel.
Well, allow us to allow you to make his presentation
You can now see where the stairs have been relocated.
to the interior of the house.
In front of those.
So it's blocking those windows?
That's correct, yes.
He has to be addressed.
One second, people who speak that are not at the microphone are not gonna get into the transcript, just so everyone knows.
Okay,
So that addresses this, do that, that's the stairs, hopefully. Really, everybody? Next.
I mean, I don't speak.
can you identify yourself, please?
So can we go to
He
like,
shouldn't speak now.
what?
He should not really speak now. Let the
Yeah,
presentation.
Can we go to the?
well, he was inviting a question about the stairs.
Can we go to the reference? Go back to the roof plan for it now, on sheet A.
Good sheet right before this.
It's fine. I know, I couldn't see that.
Right then.
Well, this sheet's a pretty good representation. You can see where basically where the entire deck used to be
Ah,
significantly larger. We reduced it by 1,832 feet for a total of 732 feet. And basically took the old deck used to be basically the whole roof, except the furthest point to the west. We've now reduced that and put the entire deck up to the south side of the property.
I think that was one of the suggestions that was made, was that we use a walkway to the elevated deck, and that's been moved to the south and more to the east as well.
That's correct.
You have any questions for John?
Anybody, questions? Was there someone here who wanted to speak to the stair issue? No, not now. Okay, so we're back to-
Hopefully that is clear, as to the changes, and I can clarify a little bit more, but I do want to point out that in our discussions, in particular, Mr. Bragman, who represents one of our neighbors, provided me with a case that this board had decided, which we looked everywhere with respect to how we might address roof decks.
That the Samudra?
And then the Samudra Farms case, actually there, I think there was a discussion we had with the applicant in reducing an existing, perhaps oversized roof deck. And agreed to a reduction to 35%. So using that as a guideline, that was also sort of the guideline for Mr. Laffey, and we see there that roof deck is reduced to about 35% of the total roof. Consistent with that case. But more importantly, as you know, part of the test is what's the impact on the character of the neighborhood. Part of your package, we provided you with 3 exhibits that were prepared by InterScience. They're all based on an aerial photograph of the neighborhood, the Sandy Court neighborhood. And we did a little analysis both with roof decks, first and second floor, but also then we did a whole analysis as to size of the dwellings in so. We attached, we also submitted with you a summary, a little chart, which you should have, which is the Sandy Court total floor area and deck analysis. Here, that's a summary. So the first page, you can see again, basically the character of the neighborhood. You can see the particular houses in our neighborhood that have roof decks. And that's on Exhibit A, including our neighbor to the northwest and our neighbor to the west. The next one is an analysis of second floor decks. We just wanted to show you that not only are roof decks a common thing, second floor decks are as well, and actually every property in this neighborhood has a second floor deck of some sort. The third exhibit is the total floor area exhibit. And I think this is important. If you look at the summary that we did, one of the elements of the impact on the character of the neighborhood and the comments we've since received, we reduced the roof deck, and now the comments we hear are, well, the house is too big. And when we look at the character of the neighborhood and what relief and what setbacks everybody else has had, it seems that our neighbors are trying to hold us to a higher standard than their own houses, among other things. But most importantly, you'll see, if you look at the floor areas, the average floor area in this neighborhood, as we've identified, the total floor area is approximately 5,026 square feet. And this is based on the town GIS records. So our proposal is basically consistent with that. Our proposal at a little over 5,000 square feet of total floor area is consistent with that. The other thing, which is not on the chart, but you can see it clearly in the aerial photograph, and I do want, if the board doesn't have a copy of it, particularly our property to the north. First of all, you'll see the property.
I'm sorry. No. You said the square footage, I see it as 5,600 feet. Is that right? Am I looking at the right one? 119?
I'm looking at the left-hand column, I guess, with the living area or the
No,
total
I'm
floor area.
I'm looking at
Yeah.
the total floor area, that's what you were referring to.
Right.
And you're saying the average is 5,000?
5,000.
And you're asking, right here is 5,600,
Right.
right? Okay, I just want to get the facts right.
So the property to our north at 59 Sandy Court has a floor area of 5,599, which is approximately, that's what I meant, was we're consistent with our neighbor to the north.
Excuse me, that's wrong.
Okay, and again, this is information based on what we obtained from the town GIS records. The other thing is, if you notice on this property, and it relates primarily to the issue at hand, is the front yard setbacks. We're asking for very minimal front yard setback of just short of 4 feet to our south and about 13 feet to our east. That's 67 plus feet. That property enjoys 2 variances that allowed a swimming pool in the front yard and a garage. And I'll give you copies of that for the record if you don't have that. But those decisions, the garage is 21 feet from the street line. Clearly, that sets a standard for the character of the area that is much different than what we're trying to do here, which is minimal encroachments into the front yard. Interestingly, in both of those decisions, for the same reason we're here, is wetlands. And I'm not saying that the zoning board should not have granted those variants back in the past, but they did so, and they said that had no detriment on the character of the area at 21 feet. And it was primarily done because wetlands were constraints on the property, which is the same issue we have. As far as the property at 43 Sand Dune, that property, interestingly, didn't need a variance because they utilized the town's section of the code that gives them 50% wetland relief automatically. And they were able to get a 64-foot setback from the street on their additions in 2006. Here's a copy of their survey. You can see where their setbacks are. So the key point in this is that our proposed variances, as we submitted in our petition as far as the front yard, are de minimis, are caused by the wetland setback requirements. And for all the reasons we told you is that to avoid the alternative of just raising the 3-story house in place, we would expand easterly into the front yard. Basically, what I would say in a minimal amount, 4 feet to the south, 13 feet to the east, which is we'll end up with setbacks far greater than our property to the north, and if anything, slightly, we'll have setbacks a little greater than 43 Sand Dune, which is to our northwest. So we did submit, at the last hearing, there was a request from our neighbors to put together a plan, a side-by-side plan. We did that, we submitted, we gave that to our neighbors. That we submitted a copy to you for the record that shows their existing development, again, which is based on the survey I just submitted, where you can see those setbacks for the attached garage. That's 21 or so feet from the street, from that would be 21 feet from the street. The other setbacks, as we mentioned, are de minimis on the height for the railing. We believe we've addressed the concerns that were raised by our neighbors in that regard. We would ask the board to proceed and address the variance request as submitted. If you have any questions, we'd be happy to answer those, and of course, we'd like to. We're available to answer any questions that have been raised by our.
Anybody on the board, any questions?
No, I'm sorry, because we've got a few proposals on this, so I'm just trying to follow.
Yeah.
What exactly was the original proposal going to the east, and what is it now?
Still the same. The footprint of the building hasn't changed. What we changed for the neighbors was we reduced the roof deck and we changed the configuration of the stairways in the back, which was the concerns, the aesthetic concerns they raised. As far as the view shed, I think there may be in the record, if not, Mr. Bregman actually provided a photograph that showed from the house to the northwest, the view that supposedly our expansion would impact to the east, but interestingly, that view shed, and if you look at that photograph, the view of where our addition is right behind it is a house under construction further to the south towards the ocean. So we wonder what impact we're having on the view shed that they thought might have existed at some point in the past.
Okay. Did you have anyone else from your group presenting at this point? No. Then we'll entertain, okay, Mr. Brennan, you want to speak on behalf of the neighbor?
Hey.
Could I have? Eric Bregman, 10 Gingerbread Lane, East Hampton, Florida. Buck, who is the famous neighbor to the northwest.
Famous or infamous?
She's a terrific artist. She's having an opening this weekend. But she's here. Could I have this drawings?
Are these new or are these from? the
No,
last
these are the ones
presentation?
I do have.
This is Berkeley, we're just submitting.
I like paper. Find the right one.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, yes, okay, I just want to make sure.
Okay, this is Eric's new package.
Yeah. These are the ones, Pat. This is what the ones I gave to Willie last week.
I don't know, it's the way to see it. Thoughts. Sure. I'll show you the second one. She was gonna put it up, so. Clarification.
I have.
Eric, I'm sorry, I know the board has the physical copy of front on the.
Eric, can you hold it up, let me see, because I got a lot of paper here, I want to see which one, so is this is not, oh yeah, okay, so that's
There's
this.
2 pages here.
What's
Yeah.
this, right?
That's this, okay, thanks. Okay.
Yes.
So we have to review our.
What's gonna happen is, Ruby's gonna,
All right,
Okay.
while she's doing that, we have them in front of us, so if you want to proceed, go ahead.
Sure. This proposal is just too big for this spot with its wetlands and the impacts on the neighbors, where it's located and what the impacts are. It's you can talk about the square feet, but if you look at the outside of the house, you put up the Mr. Laffey's renderings. Not, yes, thank you. That'd be good.
On the one that you've asked us to look at, you're showing the northerly elevation with the,
This is from Ms. Buck's.
Right.
Second floor.
showing the outline of the existing
Yeah.
residence versus the proposed new residence.
Yes.
Both those pages.
Yes, and
It's from the second floor?
from her second floor deck, yes. She does not use her roof deck at all. One of the reasons for that is that it's difficult to take up food and drinks and stuff like that. It's-
I was there.
Right, and you were there, so it's not used at all. Which the converse of it is, if this roof deck is used, it's going to be very busy with umbrellas, and chairs, and probably a barbecue, or it could be. Certainly a house of this size would have a lot of people up there if it happens. But you see what the impact of the size from these drawings, both on the first page and top and bottom. The bottom shows, with the crosshatching. Now I hasten back that this shows the railing in blue. That was the old railing. It would be set back a little bit, but it would still be the same height. Excuse me. The roof deck, so the roof deck is unnecessary. The house is too big. And the roof deck is very impactful. It's a 10-bedroom house by my count, or at least by the health department's count. There are denominated in the new plans. They don't say number of bedroom 8, bedroom 9. But if you count the bedrooms, the ones that have the ensuite baths, that comes out to either 8 or 9. And there's at least another 2 that will be counted as bedrooms by my analysis. And they're large. They're something like 300 square feet. Give or take. And this is not just, as you can see from the drawings we submitted, this is not just taking 300, 400 square feet, third floor in the old existing and distributing. It's much more from something like 3,300 square feet possibly at the house to, if you look at the whole picture, including the decks, second floor decks and the first floor decks, it's about 6,300 square feet if you divide the footprint. And the reason that's important is because that's what the impact is. That's what you see, as you see from the drawings that we submitted. It's not just the interior square feet, which includes there's an extra 300 square feet of mechanical area that doesn't officially count for gross floor area, but does count for the mass of the building. Same way with the decks that you see, that top second deck. The roof deck is definitely smaller, but it's still very disruptive. As I said, they're going to be chairs up there. If it's going to be used with the 10 bedrooms, assuming it's going to be friends and neighbors and family, it's going to be very busy. And it is already very busy, and Ms. Butler will speak to that. So either it's not going to be used, Ms. Pups, it's not used at all, in which case you don't need it, or it's going to be very busy, and it's going to be very disruptive. So the point very simply is that this house in this particular location is just too big, and it's too disruptive to the neighbors. And there are alternatives. One is making it smaller. 2 is taking that roof deck and that stairway and making it internal, whether you have a circular stairway or some other way to get up, so that people aren't, kids and dogs, etc., running across that, which is what the impact is. Or on the other side of the house. There's one other alternative that I mentioned last time, which is to move the whole house south. More or less as it is, maybe make it smaller, I think still. But if you can move it south, now the objection to that was if you move it south, it moves into a different FEMA elevation from 16 feet to 17 feet, meaning the bottom support has to be at 17 feet instead of 16 feet. Well, there's 2 feet of structure in the base of this house. You could make that, I mean, I'm not an engineer, but I've talked to people and they said, yes, you could design this. So instead of having 2 feet, you could make it a foot or 13 inches. And so the net effect of that would be if you moved it south, you would have the same house at the same height and the same ultimate height above sea level. So the fact that you're moving to a different FEMA was a difference without a difference. Right? So those are alternatives that could make this fit into, and also if you did move it south, it wouldn't bother the people across the road because they're not looking back at it, they're looking at the ocean, and there's also all the road and the space that way. So that's the bottom. It's too big, it's too disruptive, and there are ways to fix it.
Your comment about it being too big, and you've spoken about the number of bedrooms, which is not, again, within our purview, but they're not seeking any relief in their gross floor area. They're only seeking relief for the height. So when you speak about the structure being too large, that's what
They're not seeking a variance for gross floor height.
Right.
But they're able to make it as big as it is because of the front yard setbacks, that the relief that they're asking for. If they weren't there, it would be substantially smaller and would have substantially less impact. So I agree that it fits in, but the point of this is that it's not just the gross floor area that's allowed, and they are within that, just barely, but that's okay. But it's this context and this variance that allows them to reach that. If you were starting from scratch, if you look at, can I have the survey for a second? That's survey. If you're starting from scratch, between the wetlands and the setbacks, it's almost no place to put a house. You'd have to do extreme variances, but they haven't done anything to protect the wetlands with respect to the location of the house. It's exactly where the existing house is. They haven't moved the house back east, away from the wetlands, or south away from the wetlands. They haven't made it smaller and moved it in those directions. They've just said, this is where it is, this is where, and that's legitimate with Martin Shea, to go along what the prior existing was, but they haven't done anything. They haven't done anything to protect the wetlands. They've done some other things around it. Yes, they have put in more vegetation, etc., but they haven't done anything with respect to the house.
The existing house is smaller than the other houses within the neighborhood.
Yes.
Existing house.
Yes, but
And-
not in terms, I mean, it's basically the same size.
Well,
All
no,
of
it looks to me like it's substantially smaller than
Yes.
the house to the north and to the west.
Yes,
And it's maybe a little bit smaller than 43 Sandwood, which is the one you're speaking of, but maybe comparable. But they're entitled to have a larger house on the site. And it is a difficult property to accommodate because of the wetlands, because it's on a lot. So they've been struggling with how to configure the house and site the house within that lot to get a floor area, a livable, habitable area that's more consistent with what one would expect at location, while doing minimum adverse impact to the environment and to the neighbors. So at least some effort here I see is being made.
okay.
Now, you
I
have a
just wanted to
suggestion.
point out,
Go ahead.
this green line here,
Yeah,
that's that's the 100-foot setback. So all of this violates the setbacks, the required setbacks. And I'm not saying that's terrible, but that is why this is such a constrained lot, and why they are, if you'll pardon me, pun intended, why they're pushing the envelope. It's and Mr. Chairman, the question here is, yes, it's Sagapon. Yes, people like nowadays like very big houses in Sagapon.
this is not a big house by Sagaponic standards.
It's 10 bedrooms. Who needs 10 bedrooms? I don't
Well-
understand it, right? I mean, really, nothing. And it's 10 big bed. So, yes, it's not a 15,000 square.
The number of bedrooms has been relevant to us where people have sought gross floor area exceedances and variances when they have already sitting rooms, theaters, sewing rooms, libraries, gyms, and they're asking us for substantial increases in gross floor area because they need more bedrooms. And then it's relevant to suggest that perhaps some of those other rooms within the structure could be converted to bedrooms. Here, if they can fit 10 bedrooms within the permitted gross floor area and are not seeking any excess, it's difficult to impose on an individual as to how they elect to utilize the interior space of their homes. Okay,
But
so-
Sorry.
Eric, no, I'm just saying, so, size, maybe they could mitigate the size, maybe not. The other suggestion about moving the house to the south a bit seemed to have some merit, if true. I mean, that could be a feasible alternative. If they could still get roughly the same floor area, presumably, in spite of the additional height that FEMA requires, at a location that would have lesser impact on views. I don't know whether that was looked at, maybe when Wayne comes back, we'll ask if they explored that, because that was mentioned in the last meeting. But in the meantime, just in response to your issues about sheer size, I don't think that the size of the structure is particularly the issue here. It's the location on the site. The only point that you make that I've taken is that if they stayed within the required setbacks and clear of the wetlands, they'd have a very small house.
That's true.
Well,
But if
but
this-
this is exactly the circumstances for which people are entitled to come to zoning boards of appeals for variances, where the peculiar configuration of their property, things like wetlands and dunes and corner lots and things justify variances from what is a uniform zoning code designed for a whole community that has to bend to local circumstances.
So I'm being repetitive about some of them, say that in point is you have to look at this lot in the context of a particular lot.
Yeah.
And in the context of who the neighbors are, not who they are, first you look where they are and where their views and solutions. And the variances that they are requesting are what enable them to get to the size of the house. And without those front yard setback variances, they would have substantial.
Well, you're reversing the argument to a degree by saying that the variance from the setbacks enables them to get the size.
Yeah.
I'm saying, but they're entitled to the size, and the variances may be necessary to allow them to utilize the property to the fullest. In circumstances where variances may be justified to allow people to utilize their properties in a reasonable fashion, due to the peculiar circumstances of the property, which would not otherwise allow that. Now, true, they have to demonstrate that it doesn't have an adverse effect on the neighborhood or the environment, that there's no feasible alternative, and that it's the minimum variance that's necessary to accomplish a result. And that's what we're hearing. So your points are all well taken and will be certainly taken into consideration, but I would like to hear, I think there are other people here who also want to
One point
contribute. Yeah.
back for the record that has to do with what you said, and I just want to point out on the plan that's here, this is the survey that's submitted and approved by the town. All the green area that you're looking at is something that we have to preserve and protect and put in natural vegetation. If you look at this entire area, the existing driveway has to be removed, and this all the way to the street, well beyond, we're in this 100-foot area. So we're giving up all that area that presently is lawn and driveway. Same thing here. The other thing I'm a little confused as to your argument is it's now suggestion for the first time that I've heard this is move the house south. Clearly, that would require variance. We're already asking for a 3.8-foot variance from the south side. So that would require greater variances.
Yes.
To what effect? Two things that happen is the elevation of the site was keenly designed. You'll see drainage here, you'll see septic designs where there is appropriate height elevation in the ground to allow those to function. And shifting things east, west, whatever you want to do was something that Marty Shea, he said environmentally, it's better to leave the structure where it is than to try to go all these other directions. So I just wanted to point those out as a matter of fact, and that the board recognizes, yes, the structure didn't move away from the westerly property line at all, because it's basically being put in the same disturbed area. But we have given up substantial portions of our property to natural vegetation, which wouldn't have occurred if we didn't apply for a wetland. So that's just a fact that has to be.
Well, that was partially responsive to the point I was just making. However, just in fairness, Wayne was saying that it hadn't been raised. I recall that it specifically was discussed about possibly moving the house to the south. Nonetheless, You have addressed at least partially why that was not, in your view, apparently feasible due to the drainage, the septics.
Dealing with Marty Shea is always a challenge and you know, makes for creative engineering and work, right? But I don't see any reason why that house can't be moved to the south and the protected area, you know, balanced out. That would be a discussion. And if you look at the heights, the septic systems could stay essentially in the same place. Now, again, I'm not an engineer.
All right, to some degree, we're talking about trading variances. Variances will be required for this structure due to the nature of the property.
But-
Whether a variance for shortening the setback from the southerly leg of Sand Dune Court by moving the house to the south,
Right.
or a variance to move the house, extend the house to the east, is debatable. I mean, we're hearing some information, but it's largely at this point speculation. And I guess we're gonna need more information and data as to which may be more feasible or less disruptive.
And I apologize if I was already. Ms. Buck, I would have no objections to having a larger variance if you move the house to the south, because it gets rid of the impacts on her and the other neighbor, and it doesn't create any impacts on anybody else.
Yeah, you made
They're
that
fixing-
point. You
That's
made
the
that
point, right?
Because
So,
the proximity of the house to the other homes to the south of it
right,
will not be of significant effect since they look to the south, to the ocean, and not to the north.
and they're across the
where the
street.
houses. Okay, point has been made.
If I may.
Yeah.
I would just ask Eric, when you say move it to the south, how far?
That's a discussion, not.
As far as you can.
Well, as far as you can. And as far as Marty would let.
I think at this meeting, and there are other applications, you're raising certain points. There's been a lot of new paper put on the table for us and issues. There may be other people to hear from with respect to this application before we move on. So rather than a debate back and forth at this point, you've made your points. I've heard responses. I'd like to hear from other people. And then we will probably continue this hearing in order to digest this new information.
Even Eric, I'm Jim.
Yes, Eric Bregman and
It's Bregman,
Jeff
I'm
Bregman.
And I'll
Bregman,
get
Bregman.
top bill.
Okay.
I'm so confused right now.
Right, you're gonna be moving.
Okay.
Okay.
Bregman, Bregman.
Just in the name.
I'll answer anything.
What's your name again?
Jeff Bregman, East Hampton.
Thank you.
And you're here on behalf of
Bill and Patricia, you know, they're the neighbors to the north.
directly to the north,
Directly, they're the closest.
the former Guarino property.
Correct.
Marino, Marino.
I'm the Marino, that was my name.
No relation.
No relation.
Sorry, Sean, I just want to say, Ms. Buck wants to speak to, so you can do that after.
Yeah, and unless some compelling reason why you'd like to speak before Mr. Bregman. Okay, then we'll give you the opportunity.
Do you represent 59 Sandon?
Yes, all right, so we have the two neighbors to the north of this property, presumably both of whom are impacted by that view because we are told people in this neighborhood look to the south towards the ocean.
So
So,
we go.
all right,
I wanted to also talk about the gross floor area of the house. Because on the documents that the applicant gave you today, he has the gross floor area listed as 5,036 square feet.
no, isn't it 5,601?
5,036 square feet.
That's the
one?
living area.
The living, yeah, well, I'll get to that.
Okay, go ahead.
Living area is not a phrase that comes out of your code book,
No,
okay? And the phrase that's in your code book is gross floor area.
right,
And it's there's a formula, I don't know that I need to repeat it to you, but it's basically 5,000 square feet. Plus the lot area of the lot minus 40,000 square feet, and then you take 0.05 times the difference, you come up with gross square feet. That's a maximum, it's a maximum under zoning, just because
The
they have
principal dwelling.
for a principal dwelling. So just because they state a maximum doesn't mean on every lot you're entitled or it's as of right, it's a maximum. And it can vary depending on the conditions of the lot. I think it's important to remember. The second thing I wanted to note is that in these charts prepared for you today, they actually create this term living area, okay? And what they did is, again, this is in the code. This is a combination of the gross floor area, a basement if you have it, a garage if you have it, and then he threw in decks. It's not an accurate way to compare apples and apples. And what you need to do, I would suggest, in looking at this, is to compare what the code requires, which is gross floor area. And my comment to begin with is, just because they set a maximum doesn't mean on any lot you get the maximum. And on this is a lot that's classically a constrained lot. It's got wetlands to the west, they curve over to the north. So it would not be surprising at all to say on a lot like this, that the applicant is not automatically entitled to get the most he can get based on his lot size. And in fact, there are serious constraints on this lot. And I have to take issue with the charts that were provided by my colleague Wayne, because they don't really tell you that much. And when you look at the gross floor area, they do show that the proposal is larger in gross floor area than my client's house immediately to the north. And my client's house is on a property that's a lot less constrained than this. It has wetlands, yes, but if you look at the layout on that property, I don't have a survey for you. It generally, the house goes to the north because there aren't any wetlands up there. So when they built the house, they built away from the wetlands. And I have to add a gloss on Wayne's statement that the planning board is considering giving them relief completely, and that's remains to be seen. In fact, the planning board was quite concerned about the constraints and the size of the variances that were being requested, the dimensional variances that were being requested. And the reason they were concerned was something that Mr. Bregman referred to, and that is that nothing in the plan that was presented alleviates or mitigates impacts to wetlands. They didn't move that house 1 inch further away from the wetlands. What they did is they took that as the starting point on the west, and they built, what they felt they wanted by going to the east. And in doing that, when the planning board looks to grant relief, the reason that the relief statute is on the books is because just think about it logically. If you force somebody away from a wetland and naturally reduce the setback on the opposite side, then the planning board has a good reason, a factual reason to grant relief. They're granting the relief because, you're helping us, you're moving away from the wetland. They're not doing that here. What's causing the need for these variances, and I put need in quotes, it's not wetland protection, it's the size of the building. And that's the whole point of the statement about the size of the building. I want to address something that the chair talked about, and that's the number of bedrooms in the house. And you said, we don't usually get into the number of bedrooms unless there are a lot of bells and whistles. This house has a lot of bells and whistles. It's got very large bedrooms. They're all lined up. They all have en-suite bathrooms, 9 of them. They've got a nice study upstairs. This house has got a lot packed into it, and it's, as I said, it's bigger in gross square footage than my client's house to the north. And I also want to say a couple words about the setting because it's important. And I have some photos for you to take a look at. Drainage is a serious issue on this property. And in fact, the Board of Trustees just reported in this week's 27 East are about to spend a couple of $100,000 because the roads flood because there's heavy runoff from the property. So I want to give you these diagrams because this is taken not so long ago. How many of these? 1, 2, 3, 4. And this ponding is being,
Yeah.
this is in the area where they're expanding to the east. And, Wayne says, well, we really checked it out and we're very careful about drainage and such. The fact of the matter is that the village's engineer was, in the planning board, was quite concerned about the drainage here because the drainage structure, in fact, he said, I'm not sure the drainage structures are gonna work. Because there are only 12 inches that separate the drainage structures from groundwater. And he said, you gotta do something more. So this is another reason why this isn't an automatic gimme on a 9-bedroom, maybe 10-bedroom. I can't, there are a couple spaces in there, they don't know what they're doing. This is not a gimme. This lot is highly constrained. And statements, the description I've just given to the planning board is why we're here today. Because I stood up and said, the balancing tests that the zoning board is required to apply to this case are exactly what we need. You need to, especially when you're looking at gross square footage, they're within 17 feet of the maximum gross square footage. That may not be appropriate on a lot that's as highly constrained as this lot. Maybe on another lot, it's fine, but this isn't another lot. And all of the cases, I'd like to get a chance to respond to Wayne's, the cases that he submitted as we move forward, but they're all factually driven. It depends on the conditions on the lot, and you can't ignore them here. Flooding is an issue. Another aspect of the house that you may not think of is something actually my client reminded me of. This house is going to be 5.5 feet taller than it is now. Now, I'm not saying that's illegal. They're asking for a variance for the railing around the roof deck, but it's a fact that it's going to be 5.5 feet taller. So there's more mass, and the extension on the house is 37 feet long. So it's like a big, massive square wall squarely in the view shed of my client. And I know that I think the chairman in another case at its meeting said, we're all about view sheds here. We're all about that. So, I just invite the board to take a step back realistically and assess the size of this building. And I also want to talk about the roof deck a little bit because, the impression is, oh, well, we fixed that problem. We reduced it 35%. I gave Wayne the case. I wanted to share the case with you. But if you look at the case, the question that you have to ask is 35% of what? Okay, because in that case, the Samuda Farms case, there was a house involved in that case. Okay, and now here are a couple facts that may suggest that you got to look more carefully at this roof deck, because in Samuda, first of all, the house is on 2.6 acres, much bigger house, 2.5 times bigger than this lot. Also, the board itself stated that the house was modestly sized for the property. They also said that it was so wide that neighbors couldn't even see it. And the variances that they were asking for were largely for planters and a staircase. And they also noted in the decision that the application overall reduced gross floor area. None of that's applicable here. So the question I would invite the board to ask when an applicant gets up and says, well, 35%, that's your rule. 35% of what? You have to look at whether what's proposed is reasonable, looking at the site that it's on. And I would suggest to you that when an applicant, they certainly knew the restrictions on this property when they bought it. I'm sure they looked it over very well. They're charged with understanding, what the restrictions were. And they had to understand that, you might not be able to get the maximum gross square footage on a lot like this. It's perfectly reasonable to anticipate that. So, the fact that they're going like, oh, you're within gross square footage, frankly, that's a very aggressive opening bid in my opinion, to the board. It's a fairly aggressive bid. They're within 17 feet of the maximum gross floor area on an application that's wrapped in wetlands, where every square foot of that building is inside the wetland setback? That doesn't sound that persuasive to me. I want to talk about the stairway alternative. I just want to make sure I've hit all my points here. The concern about the stairway was not just, which direction it was going. It's if you look at that north elevation of the building, what makes it look like a hotel, that's the south elevation. What makes it look like a hotel is the double-decker stairs there on the first and second floor. It's like, come on, what are you doing? And that was something that my clients found, not very visually appealing, which I think is understandable. We have discussed the possibility of moving that stairway to the inside of the building. It can be done. But today I brought a proposal to give to you, which I'll share. I have copies for everybody. 1, 2, 3, 4. So what we did is,
John
One
doesn't have
one
one.
more, yeah.
Sure.
No, sorry.
We consulted with our architect. We used the applicant's floor plan. We showed you the first one is the existing floor plan. And east is to the right, north is to the top. You can see if you flip it to the next page, it's an alternative floor plan. We maintain the shape and the design of the building, but we cut off 12 feet. Okay, so this design is 12 feet. It's shorter.
Same number of rooms.
Same number
A small
of
room.
rooms. Same number of rooms. Some of what gave us the room to do this was the removal of some decking. They had some small decking around it, but the total reduction in the square footage is minimal. I was actually quite surprised. This plan that would shorten it by 12 feet, cuts out only 511 square feet from the building. Certainly that is an alternative that is feasible for the applicant to pursue. And we did not reduce the number of bedrooms, although frankly, again, on a lot this size with these constraints, is it really reasonable to have 9 bedroom? I know it's small, set upon its standards. It's not your dream house, and it may not have the movie room downstairs, but it's a highly constrained lot. Undoubtedly, the lot was priced in a way that reflected the constraints. These are savvy people that bought the lot.
Jeff, you have any idea about how much square footage is reduced within each bedroom? How much kind of size these reduced bedrooms would be?
I can get that. I don't know that I can give that to you today.
No,
but
you don't
we
have
can
to, but I'm
provide- we can
curious to
provide it.
see.
I will say that the bedrooms that they plan are pretty large. They're large bedrooms. And we can do a comparison for the.
Well, that's been stated, but large is a subjective term. I'd be curious to see what size the bedrooms were designed at and what size they might be
I can sort of answer.
if they
Well,
were
let's just
reduced
wait.
as you.
This doesn't, these plans don't do much with no dimensional.
There's no dimensions.
Well,
Basically, I could just say, this plan's the same as this plan. There's I can see no difference.
well, we can have plans dimension. I'll tell you something, I've had trouble reading dimensions on the applicants.
But the point is well taken, because I'm looking on the first version, for example, that corner office. And I'm looking at a much reduced office on the second page. Well, an office that's maybe 12 by 12, maybe an
I don't see
adequate
how you
office.
can comment on something that's not.
Okay,
relative.
That's the point I'm making, is
Fair
that
point.
we can't.
Fair
Yeah.
point. I agree with you.
Yeah.
But this hearing actually came up kind of quickly because the applicant wasn't certain it was gonna continue today. We'd be happy to get dimension.
Yeah,
So that you know. what
that's
you're
the
doing.
request.
No problem. But let me continue as long as we're on the plan. In the same vein, as a concept, we also came up with a change in the location of the stair. This is on the,
Right page?
it's on the, it's on the third last page. It's this diagram, if you can go through it. And what it does is it moves, I may need some help here because I'm a word guy and a statute person, visually, spatially, I don't do that well, but this is a stairway up on the west side of the property, so it eliminates all that huge long runway across the northern facade, which also blocks a window northwest. The interesting thing about this is it's a more efficient plan for the person living in the house because the stairway has access to the kitchen, which is, if you're using that upstairs deck, the upper deck, you know, typically you're gonna prepare drinks, food, you wanna be able to get from the kitchen to the upstairs deck. We think this is a
And
more,
barbecue.
we think this is a more efficient plan. Again, we can get
That's
a
the
dimension.
green element.
Yes, the green.
Which now leads from the kitchen up on the west side of the structure as opposed to going across the north.
Yes, now I know the neighbor might not, like stairway on the west, but the difference here is you don't have that huge ramp. And I think one of the concerns is that you're gonna have, kids and dogs and running and, going on. And also the northern, it makes the facade, it's not an attractive facade, it's a very cluttered facade. And I think it was not totally unfair to say it looked a little bit like a hotel in Montauk, but I leave that to you. So, what I'm trying to suggest today is there are alternatives, there are reasons to seriously consider reducing the size of this. The maximum gross square footage is what you should be comparing. It doesn't really I don't think it's persuasive to say that on a lot like this, I'm entitled to get the maximum gross square footage.
Unfortunately, at the earlier hearing, there may have been too much focus on the aesthetics, the design of the deck and the stairway, and not enough on the issues that are being raised today, okay? Your point about maximum GFA is an interesting one, which is they are entitled under the code to the maximum GFA. And I think you would concede that on a constrained property such as this or others, of which there are many in Sagaponic, there is justification for variances from the code requirements to accommodate reasonable utilization of constrained properties. Your argument is that it's not the minimum variance that would be necessary to accommodate that, and that we don't necessarily need to believe that they are entitled to the full GFA that the law requires, as long as there is sufficient relief in the design to allow a better utilization of the property.
Yes,
And among those arguments are the number of the bedrooms and the size of the bedrooms,
yes,
which could be reduced without materially impairing the applicant's needs and resulting in a lesser variance of some sort,
Yes.
which would have a mitigation on the neighboring properties. So if I'm
There's
summarizing.
there's a balance, the balancing that goes on here, there are dimensional issues. Where they're asking for relief, but it also impacts the ability to fit gross floor area on, and it's within the board's discretion, and I think it's relevant to the standards to make adjustments. And again, granting the minimum variance necessary is a very important.
Jeff, have you had any opportunity to have that discussion with the applicant prior to this presentation?
We were in discussion. I could not have this discussion with him because I only met with the clients late yesterday, and when I called Wayne, I don't begrudge him this, he said, we're gonna go in front of the board tomorrow.
All right, so
So we could continue.
don't mean to cut you off, and we're certainly willing to hear more from you at some point. But there are other people here on this application and on others. And in my view, there's been so much new information presented today that I would not want to close the hearing today. And I think I would like to give the parties the opportunity to speak to each other further so that we can hear possible resolutions or compromises at the next meeting. So I'm going to hear from, I know Ms. Buck wants to speak, and maybe also Mr. Marino. So let's.
Okay, thank you for the time, I appreciate it.
Okay. Ms. Buck, do you want to take the floor?
Hello, board, and thank you for your time, your concern, and your work for this community. It is greatly appreciated by you, and I think all of Sagaponic. In order to preserve this place as the quiet and respectful place that it's always been. I've lived in Sagaponic for 11 years now, and despite the many changes, your stewardship has kept Sagaponic from being overbloated, overbuilt, and so I thank you. I come here today as a concerned homeowner about the quality of life on Sand Dune Court, which has so far for me always been very respectful and quiet. This proposal submitted by the Krumholtz family represents an enormous incursion into my privacy and the quiet that Sand Dune Court is known for. I'd like to acknowledge for the record that the sheer size and proximity of this house is completely out of scale to the homes around it. I know this because as the house stands on any given day, when the Krumholtz family is in residence, I am able to hear full conversations verbatim from their home, depending on the direction of the wind on the beach. Their home is close enough that I can see what they are wearing, what toys are being played with, and their full conversations amongst one another. When you're talking about also the bedrooms, sure, 10 bedrooms, as many as you can fit into your square footage. However, in a home of this proximity, that means 20 people at any time in this home going up and down this staircase.
Just want to interrupt for one moment.
Okay.
They don't characterize it as 10 bedrooms. That has been
I get it.
said. Those rooms may be utilized as bedrooms, but on the plans, they're not shown as bedrooms.
Okay.
So
So I'm just saying
we'll
that
accept your characterization
Yes.
for purposes of your discussion.
this is a home being planned for many, many occupants in very, very, very close proximity to other neighbors. I've invested an enormous amount of time, energy, and money to create privacy for my family through the proximity of the homes around me. This new proposal makes all of that effort moot. I too have a roof deck. I know that sound carries at that height. I also know that a roof deck requires furniture, shade elements, toys for children, all of which will be now part of my life, my vision, and my sightline. The proposed very large unproportional outdoor staircase on the north-facing elevation is yet another intrusion. Aesthetics aside, sound is very important, especially in this proximity and in this area where sound travels in crazy ways because of the wind from the beach. So when the stairway, as it's being proposed, sustains a great deal of family and friend traffic up and down. It already does, just the half-size one that's there. It's a main thoroughfare. Dogs, children, guests, help. I can tell you what the housekeeper is wearing every day when she's at the sink doing the dishes. We're that close. I invite anyone who doesn't understand the close proximity to come and visit my home and see what I'm talking about. If the stairway can be moved to the southern exposure, that direct noise, foot traffic, and privacy for the Krumholtzes and for me and for the Marinos is mitigated. Put it on the other side. Unless the object is to just not care about how you're impacting your neighbors. It can go on the other side. I ask the board to please consider these effects on my well-being, my privacy, the quiet and respect that Sand Dune Court affords. I'm sure that all of you enjoy the serenity and the quality of life that Sagaponic is, and it's been known for. I hope that you can understand that by approving this variance and the design, your decision will devastate my quality of life. Again, thank you for your time, and I have to say that I feel that I'm privileged to have an opportunity to be able to speak about things that are going to impact me so greatly. And thank you.
Okay. Anyone else here who'd like?
I'll just a couple of quick words, I'll move
Right, introduce yourself and
Sure.
speak up if you're not at the podium.
Yeah, Stan. William Marino, we're the closest neighbor in proximity to the Krumholtzes. We want to be good neighbors. We did take a really hard look at what was being proposed. And we're trying to work within that proposal to make sort of a compromise, if you will. I'm trying to have them achieve most of what they are asking for, but also have them consider how it impacts us. So it's interesting when you look at that large second staircase, which we call a motel kind of look, a Montauk look. It's so easily eliminated by, and I think really to the Krumholtz's benefit, if you put the stairs on his deck going to the roof, because nobody needs to see that. And also all the food, drinks, coffee, whatever you want to do on the roof deck is much better accessed through public kitchen right up these stairs. I don't understand why the architect would design it that way when we could do it like this. It doesn't make any sense to me. And I actually spoke to the building inspector, he said, your flow would look better. So, and he said, I'm not supposed to comment, but your flow is better. And so, what we did is we looked at the view shed is important. We think from a square footage standpoint, we looked at reducing a 12-foot slice, making it instead of 37 feet further, 25 feet further, which would help with the view shed from our house and Deborah's house. And it really gives you, it's a 10-bedroom house based on code, not what they call it.
So a reduction of 12 feet of the extension to the east. Do we know what the length, the depth is from north to
35
south?
feet.
No, from north to south. Is that
35
35 feet?
feet.
So it'd be 35 by the 12 times.
12.4.
It'd be a reduction of 500 square
It's
feet.
511 square feet. And a lot of that really is really what a lot of that is, I want you to understand, is an existing roof deck that's here. So what we're doing is eliminating this slice, which a lot of it's a deck. When you have a massive amount of deck right off the master bedroom, and certainly on the westerly side of the property, all that in yellow is roof deck, right? So we're cutting really this piece. You have a better, much better entry to that roof deck, safer. You don't have kids running back and forth across the back, which we're gonna hear, maybe jumping off or falling off. It's here where it belongs. And it's close to the barbecue stove, it's close to the kitchen. It seems to me absolutely logical. Because look how it goes, goes right up to the roof deck. I mean, I don't understand why you're doing it but that.
We're getting a little repetitive. I think, we've heard a lot of this testimony in one form or another, so.
Appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody else want to speak in favor of or in opposition to or in response? Wayne, anything today or if you want to reserve?
Of course, we have some concerns with the liberty that of certain facts. There was one issue just raised, the number of bedrooms. It's an 8-bedroom house. That's what we applied to the health department for. Yeah, someone could go and say, these other rooms may be used for something else, but that's what we applied for. And that's just some of the facts. Obviously, there's some information that hasn't been shared with us, and I understand Jeff may have tried to reach out to us to get that information. We certainly will go back and look to it. Mr. Bregman's proposal to move the house south of some uncertain amount. We'll look at that issue and try to address everything else. If the board has any other things you want us to address.
No, I think those, I don't want to belabor it. The points have been made. I think that those things that were focused on at the last meeting, which were primarily the roof deck and the stairs, you obviously took to heart and seemed to address. So I'm going to assume that if we adjourn this or continue this hearing to next month, there'll be an opportunity for further discussion on the other issues that were raised today. And hopefully we'll be able to come to some sort of a resolution that will satisfy the applicant and the neighbors and minimize the need for us to impose a result. Okay. All right, so I will entertain unless there's anybody else today, I'll entertain a motion to continue this meeting to the June meeting, which will be held on, that's the first Friday in June is June, and the second Friday is June 14th at 3 p.m. here. Do I hear a motion? Okay, second, all in favor? Aye. Thank you very much for your presentations and the seriousness with which everyone is taking this. And we look forward to hearing from you next month.
Thank you.
Okay? All right. So for those of you who have had the stamina to sit through that, and I'm now ready to go forward with the next item on the agenda, which is 35 Spud C, paying to 35 Potato Road. And this is a hopefully simpler application, even though it's been characterized as a unicorn with many variances. I think it may be more straightforward. So, John, you have the.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay. Oh, yeah, okay, right. Yeah, we did it. So 100. Yeah.
I'm nutritionally.
That's it.
Yeah.
Yes. Usually. It's always so.
I can't remember.
Chris, did you, Chris is on Zoom?
Yes, it's Chris.
Yep.
Did Chris prepare a proposed decision on this matter?
It's in your package.
Yeah, I think, I thought we said that even though we didn't have. Yeah.
Oh, I didn't.
We still need to close the hearing on 35 Spud.
Yeah. well,
No, we haven't closed it. We're gonna talk
See if
about it.
there are any further comments today.
Yeah.
Oh, we can close it. You did a proposed decision, right? Which I thought I saw, but I want to make sure. This is all the stuff in this prior. I gotta clear the deck here.
A lot of stuff.
Well, okay, are all those people gone for good or are they just taking a break?
We have one more.
Yes.
Fine. Oh, so this is a little, this package?
It's in our package.
Okay. All right, good, go ahead. That's what I want to know. So, because I think, and Richard, with your comments.
Yeah, I don't think they need.
We can come.
Okay. I think that.
Well, right now,
Okay.
Okay.
no, we don't want to set precedent.
All the board that's coming aboard, what, John, you will have the floor on the 35 Spud application.
Well, I did speak, my understanding at the last meeting was that the board wants to consider things, but was a possibility for a determination. Today, I do see something in front of you, at the risk of always possibly having the feet from the jaws of victory. I'll be bold enough to ask if that decision. First, I'll ask if there are any questions that you have for me. And the second, I will ask, if we don't find it presumptuous, if what appears to be the decision grants all the relief that I'm requesting. And if that is the case, I will.
So you've made a very thorough and complete presentation, and everything was reviewed. We held the hearing open because we have found in the past that it's a good thing to do in case things come up, is further communications, and we don't have issues about whether it was within the record or not. So we did hold it open, and there has been a question raised, which we have a draft of a proposed decision, which is not finalized, and there is a question that Richard would like to discuss, raise here, that we can do, and if we can get some resolution on that, then perhaps we can render a decision.
So my question is, you always talk about the neighbor and the noise from the generator, their generating location, screening, all screenings there. It's the proposed application has a sunken pit for the generator. It's already sunken down. Off the top of my head, I can't remember what the numbers, 2.5 feet below grade or something to that number. But then you're gonna put a 6-foot fence on top of something that's 2 feet in the ground in the grade. So therefore, that makes it 8 feet above. Is that right with the numbers?
Yes.
Something like that. So I'm really,
Fortunately,
see no need for a fence on top of something that's sunk.
that was an attempt for sound attenuation, but
That's the only
it
issue
gets the
that I
actual
have.
number for that.
Meanwhile, the generator meets the noise requirements. It's, the variance is for the generator on the setback, correct?
Yeah, and you also have the,
And
I always
then-
confuse air handlers with condensers, there's condensers.
Also, there's condensers, they meet the code. I don't like to recommend, I just disagree. So, with that, I don't think it's needed that they need a 4 or 6 foot fence on top of a sunken generator pit.
How high is
It is right,
It's coming out of the ground to 6 foot, but we
Why don't
can
we
drop
bring
it
it
to
back to
4
4?
foot.
why don't we just drop it to 4?
we can,
You know, I was just
See,
trying to get.
then again, you're applying for a variance for a fence around a generator that's technically
In compliance.
it's compliant already. Correct?
Yeah.
So
Obviously, we don't have any.
it's
problem.
one less variance you should.
Oh, your sound engineer may have recommended the higher height just for further sound attenuation, but due to the generator to generator, the distance of the houses, the fact that it is compliant both in decibels and the height, we just felt that it would be unnecessary and preferably not. So if you're willing to concede that.
Yes.
Oh, gosh, yes, I mean, yeah.
we'll make it work.
See, everybody thinks that these shrubs take away the sound
They don't really.
with the screening. That's not true.
I know.
Because all you gotta do is sit in a spot with the generator's on it for 24 hours. If your hearing is good, it's still there, but it's not noisy.
No, they're fine and quiet. It's not in the old days, on the old state areas, it's not really a diesel engine.
You know, there's a lot of other issues with the pit itself, but you have a paid architect to discuss that thing with you.
We're gonna have to satisfy John.
It's a lot against my rules of what, if I was to build a building in location of a generator, where the situation it is, and then the fence on top of that. I'll leave it at that.
Okay.
No, we
All right.
understand.
The applicant has already suggested that they would be willing to remove that, and otherwise, it's been though there have been many variances sought, and it is rather complicated, they all seem to be very beneficial to the neighborhood and the environment. Moving the house back from the coastal erosion zone and the dune crests. The reduced frontage actually renders the house more consistent with the other houses along that Potato Road. Notwithstanding the interesting discussion about whether it's measured from the northerly or the southerly side of the road, the house will be consistent with the setbacks of the. So personally, we did have our attorney draw up a prospective decision. And I think it grants all of the other variances: front yard setback, accessory structure swimming pool, accessory structure air conditioning utility equipment, accessory structure in the side yards, the generator. The only one that we're now modifying is number 6, which is the 6-foot fencing screening the front yard. Oh, no, wait a minute, it's not the 6, it's parking.
Did I hear Dune Crest in there as well?
Yeah, well, I'm running down.
Sorry.
Is that from the secondary or the primary?
I'm not gonna go there.
I'll get into that.
John and I have had our discussions.
Okay, so I believe, now we just got this in front of us today, and I don't know that everyone's had the opportunity to read it carefully.
I have not.
Okay, but you do recall that the
I do.
requests that were made, so without reviewing all of the predicate language as to what was considered and heard, let's see, paragraph 4 of the, it's a fact. They submitted manufacturing specs, utility areas, partially sunken, surrounded by an acoustic enclosure 6 feet in height. So I don't think that we need really to modify any portion of the prospective decision, which was fact-finding as to what was discussed at the meeting. The only portion that would be changed would be in the findings. Certainly the benefits are all. Let's see. Chris, I don't recall whether there was another reference to the fencing. In the-
It's, yeah, I mean, I guess, paragraph 6 at the very end on the grant, and then
one that I found, but I was wondering in the ABCDs
in the actual, yeah,
the following conclusions: the grants and the variances. Heights reduced, all of that stuff is still in effect. The wide design, leaf for the front yard, press the soon side, the generator and air conditioner side yards. Press, okay, so I don't see anything in the findings that needs to be revised. The only thing is the granting of number 6, the 6-foot fence, which would be deleted. And with that modification,
Wonder would they hire Marcus there?
sorry,
Who's talking?
Yeah.
Who's speaking?
We're all good.
okay. Then we have before us a proposed decision granting all of the applicants' requested variance with the exception of number 6, which was the 6-foot fencing. And with that modification, do I hear a motion to adopt the decision? I'll make that motion. Do I hear a second?
I'll second.
All in favor? Okay. So you have the variance with that sort of exception. Thanks very much.
Thank you
Thank you for
very
your
much.
patience with the.
No, it was
Entertaining.
It was interesting. I always fun to see Wayne and Jeff.
Yeah, it was a good crew today, right? It was pretty active.
Eric and Jeff, it's always fun.
And they talked about forming a firm, but they couldn't decide who had to go first. Bregman and Bregman or Bregman and Bregman,
Yeah.
so it fell apart.
That might be true.
Right.
Or if it's not on this front.
When I formed my own firm, I chose to be the second name because I felt the surname, the second name was the more significant one anyway.
Your brother.
No, it wasn't my brother, it was my partner, Brilliant Mizell.
Oh, that's.
But when formed on May 1st, Law Day, 1979, We were in business together for 44 years.
Wow.
Yeah. Without a written partnership agreement and without a significant dispute between us in the entire time.
It's nice to see.
I have the story. I'm sorry.
We do have another application.
Oh, okay, sorry.
Yeah, unless you can tell it very quickly.
No, Mary Jane wants to hear the story, go ahead.
Oh, Mary Jane, yeah, you've been very patient. Okay.
I was in my office and my dad was a contractor. Years walked in, I was working on a construction contract, and he looked at me after 40 years, my uncle, and said, "What are you working on?" I said, "Construction contract." And he looked at me and said, "What does that look like?" And I said, "Dad, you gotta be kidding me. All the houses you built, handshake. No longer. Anyway, thank you very much.
Have a
Thank
great
you.
weekend, guys.
Thanks very much. Good luck with your house. Okay,
Thanks for your patience.
with that being said, we actually now have an item of new business. This is the application of Alfred Steiner, 101 Hedges Lane application. It doesn't say what number it is, but it was
Sorry, it's
105.
4, application number 4 of 2024, and for the applicant, Mary Jane Asada. You have,
It's always nice to see my colleagues in action.
yeah,
Before, I just wanted to acknowledge that we have submitted the affidavit mailing and posting, and hopefully they're in good form. And to start, the calendar says that this is a variance for 4 parking spaces located in the required front yard, 26 feet from the property line. I'd like to correct that. The initial submission from the architect, I believe, to get the turn down letter provided for that. But I had asked the architect as well as the client to reconsider to reduce or certainly increase the setback as well as reduce the number of parking spaces. So what's really before you and what the application shows as well as the survey is 3 spots that are 9 feet wide, that is 39 feet from Hedges Lane, not 26 feet.
39 feet, okay, because I saw the building permit that was closed, that the amendment had before.
So the 39 feet, if you look in the current application, is what it shows. As discussed in all of the cases here, this is a.
And it's not a setback from Halsey Lane either.
Yes.
Right? It's Hedges Lane, yeah.
It's a big print of that.
This
I quote that.
is a corner lot. Basically, and the entrance for the property and new construction is on Hedges Lane, which is the long linear portion of the lot. Usually you would have it on the short side, on a corner lot, you know, the short side is considered the front yard and the side is usually considered, even though it's a legal front yard, the side yard. In this instance, when they went to the architectural review board, you know, the house was all designed. The architectural review board had serious objections to the applicant having a driveway cut on Fairfield Common Lane.
Was that because of its proximity to the corner?
I was
Why
not there.
That's,
I am not privy, I looked at it, it was for various reasons, the architectural review board did not want a curb cut on Fairfield Common Lane. They didn't want a curb cut, they didn't want the driveway, they didn't want anything on that side of the street. Now, I actually went there to see and,
yeah,
you know, the post office, the temporary post office, I couldn't understand that because there was no bushes, it was.
and it's not the historic district either,
No.
it's just actually the south side of Hedges at that location is
They,
not.
I was actually, when I visited the site to try to figure out what was its objection, where there's a lot of traffic, I couldn't figure it out, but.
Why did they say?
You should want parking in the front yard. That,
Well, wait a minute, they didn't want parking on Fairfield, or they didn't want parking on Hedges, as opposed to the front yard, because they're both front yard.
Okay,
Because
so
the front yard is Hedges in my mind.
what?
Well, the prior house fronted, the prior home fronted, but the prior home fronted on Hedges.
Yeah. Right.
With the garage and the parking there, and I, for one, could not understand the concept of this design with turning it with this long blank face to Hedges.
I don't understand the design, but this lot
as you know, here's the front yard, legal front yard, here's the legal front yard. This is a side yard and a very, very small rear yard. If you look at the.
Well,
You got that.
you're saying what you're saying, but it's not shown. the way
Oh, I'm
it's
sorry,
shown.
I'm sorry,
Yeah,
sorry.
It's
You know
north
what,
to the
I was
north.
looking at.
The front yards are at the north and the east.
Here, so here's the front yard, here's the front yard, here's a
Correct.
very side yard, here's a rear yard.
Right.
So you're referring to the north side of the
The
property.
north and the east are both front
Okay,
yards.
so
property.
they had a design where they were coming in, and as you know, parking is only prohibited in the required front, not the entire front. Only the required front, required side, and 10 feet in the back. I'm not, I'm just stating it for the record. This is 97.8 feet to the front of the house on Hedges.
Yeah.
So there was room here to have conforming parking, but they objected to that.
And that's what we're asking is why.
We're asking why, because
Conceptually, it makes no sense.
it makes no sense.
I cannot answer that,
So
but
what-
if they went and it was held up, the building construction was held up, so they finally capitulated, is my understanding, and agreed to do this.
Yeah, because to me, from a visual point of view, even though it's not historic district, when you make that turn onto the east-west Hedges, that should be sort of the serene, that's an important view shed and view for me in Sagaponic. And instead of having a home fronting on it with a normal front, to have that long blank wall and a big parking lot in front is not particularly appealing.
Well, to go farther than that is, if the client wanted it in the side yard, front yard, side yard, which would be the easterly side, and it met the code, why wouldn't they just put it in there?
And by the way, no, I
That's
understand
the
the
question.
logic, I understand the logic after having built the building the way it is, to say that they want people to be able to park and walk around to the front door without having to walk the entire length of the property. However, okay, we're not bound by the AHRB's advisory opinion. So if we think that it is preferable,
We would like to have a driveway there.
On the east side you're
Yes.
talking about.
That's how they
where you can
originally.
drive in and come to the front of the house and you've got your setback
That's where.
and you've got a
They
conforming
wanted-
location for parking.
They wanted it that way.
Well, if we could understand some rationale for it, we might be able
Maybe
to.
we could ask Mr. Woodsman
Do you have some idea
his
about that?
input.
I can't say as I have reason and rationale to offer you. What I can say is that the board does not like multiple driveway cuts. So the applicant then took away their driveway cut from the Fairfield Pond side and presented a turnaround, a cul-de-sac as it were, in front of the front door so you could drive in, drop people off and come out. The board.
On Hedges?
On.
Or on Fairfield?
From Fairfield
On
Pond.
Fairfield,
So
okay.
the first,
Like this.
yeah, that's fine.
So they didn't want
So
to
the
do
first,
curb cut.
basically, the first thing that they wanted to do was come through.
Can I interrupt one second? Is this the first rendering of the plan, or this is the second?
This is the first rendering of the plan. This is the 3 parking spaces 39 feet away from Hedges. So the first plan was to come in and have the driveway split to go to the garage, and then have it come here to drop people off and exit onto Fairfield Pond.
Oh,
Neither did the board. So then they came back with another plan with an entrance coming in from Hedges, splitting to go to the driveway, and then with like a roundabout. And the board objected to that as well. So at that point in time, they were left with asking for a variance for parking in the front yard to be able to put a car here and then a pathway, because the front door is here. The
Yeah.
front door is not on Hedges.
right. But the only reason that they have this crazy configuration is because I understood that the AHRB wouldn't let, or didn't want them to have their driveway and parking on Fairfield Pond with a single curb cut that would be perfectly conforming to code. And I don't understand
Well,
why
the
they would
applicant-
object to
The applicant
that.
has not changed their address to.
Oh, but wait a minute,
Fairfield
because the
Pond.
garage is all the way around the other side. So they wouldn't have access to the garage without either a lengthy driveway through the property or a second curb.
And the
But they
ARB
could have a curb cut that went directly from the westerly edge of the property on Hedges to the garage. and a separate driveway for parking in front of the house from Fairview.
And that would meet our code as it's serving two distinct and separate purposes, yes. That was still objected to by the ARB, and the applicant capitulated into the design that they have here.
What does the applicant want if they weren't trying to accommodate?
I will, if you would entertain where we wouldn't have to do this, but get in the front of the house in a conforming location with parking to be, I will speak to them because that really would be perfect.
Okay, so now hang on,
This,
before we go back.
we're here because of they wouldn't like two things, they wouldn't let you go in the front of the house, so I will go.
When you say they wouldn't let, do they?
The ARB.
AHRB.
Yes,
I don't believe that they have the power to
well,
dictate that. They can state their preferences.
but when
And
you're
we
held
try,
up,
we try to accommodate their preferences, and the village does, because they serve an important function, I think, in terms of the quality and preserving the historic virtues of the village.
I believe that the architect came before the board and the owners, and they got frustrated because they wanted to start construction.
All right, well, that may not happen, because I would like to see the minutes of the AHRB, the discussion and the rationale for why they declined what seems to me to be the most rational approach, which is, I can't say that I'm happy with the way the house was designed under the circumstances. You know, it's like sort of build and then ask forgiveness as opposed to, ask permission or get some design input.
I think that if we can have a curb cut
Yeah,
on the other street, you don't
Yeah.
need any variance.
no, that's my point. My point is that the only reason they need the second curb cut is because they now have a garage on the opposite side from the front of the house on Fairfield. So the design is really unfortunate for that location, because it's created this problem, which either they had fronted on Hedges, or if they had fronted on Hedges and configured the house in a different way so that the garage wasn't at the opposite end of the property. They could have had a single curb cut and conforming parking locations. And so it's definitely clearly a self-created hardship. However, if right now we're being asked to give a variance for something that the applicant doesn't even want, and the AHRB doesn't have the power to tell them that they can't do it the other way. So before I start getting in the middle of this thing, I'd like to know what the AHRB's thinking was, which is why I said that I don't think that we're rendering a decision today. But if there is no serious objection to reconfiguring it the way the applicant really would like it, which would be conforming, we won't have to give a variance at all.
Could you run through the?
All right, can we ask,
configuration?
right, so this is 97 feet right now.
Okay.
You know, from the street to the here, so there's 17 feet of area that you could use for driveway and parking without any variances.
Right.
Now, does this board have a problem if there's a curb cut on that side with this? And this in a conforming situation just to go back there, or is that?
You're talking about a driveway to go from the front back to the garage?
Well, because otherwise, yeah, or are you saying to have this cut as well as this cut?
No,
You would need two separate, you can't connect them, the two cuts must serve separate and distinct.
That's like.
No, but they wouldn't need the separate curb cut if she's saying drive into the front, 3 parking spaces, and then the driveway back to the garage.
Yes.
It's the address is Hedges Lane, you have to maintain a driveway entrance off of Hedges.
Oh, you do have to.
Yes,
maintain-
unless you have emergency service.
So the address remains Hedges Lane, even though they've elected to make the frontage on Fairfield?
A front door does not a front yard make.
Ah, okay.
But
Okay,
it's a
let me go back.
But it's a corner lot again.
Let
Okay,
me-
but hang on one sec, I'm sorry, keep interrupting, but I want to understand, or John, as long as there is a curb cut, go directly to the garage on Hedges, that's legal and conforming. They could have a separate curb cut with a driveway on Fairfield
It doesn't-
for conforming parking spaces in what would then be a side yard,
Yes.
and they wouldn't need any variances.
Nope.
They would have their 2 curb cuts.
Yep.
They would minimize the amount of paving and driveways on the property, because there would be one
Which is
straight to the
objective of
garage,
the ARB.
one to the house. So, I think.
So can I get a picture look? This is how So what you're suggesting is this is horrific here, right here. This is, but you're suggesting something coming in on Hedges directly to the garages this way? And then also here?
I am going to.
This is no go.
I'm going to speak to the applicant.
Because you got stone walls and everything, this is the front of the thing, this is,
It's ugly and
it doesn't fit into this.
I'm going to speak to the client and say, well, they're gonna be screening all of this, obviously. So, I mean, right now, when you go out there, I'm not gonna speak to the architectural style of the house. It's all in the beholder. I mean, you and I may have not designed it that way, if that exists. But what I'm going to ask them is that I believe there's been discussions where the ARB is not allowed to dictate driveways, so that if they have a driveway here with conforming parking, do they even need this at all, because you're not receptive to this?
Right.
And I will speak to them.
Okay, now, further to that point, okay? In my view, the way the house is constructed and designed is a shame. Because that blank wall, that northerly wall that faces Hedges is blank and ugly. Now, normally, we like screening when somebody has a tennis court or a driveway adjacent to another property that gives privacy and protects it. But the last thing I want to see is screening along Hedges Lane that blocks the views and encloses space when our whole concept is open view sheds, farmlands, and space. So I certainly don't like the existing configuration of the driveways, but I'm not sure what we're left with. You take away the offending parking areas, we're still left with this one blank wall there. What are they gonna do about that?
a landscaping.
We haven't seen that. All they saw is the stone walls, which is totally nice.
And that's along Hedges. What's gonna be along the frontage of the building, which is now just this ugly blank wall?
Oh, you mean along here?
Yeah.
I believe they're gonna be, I mean, these are plantings,
I'm
but you
assuming
know,
there'll be some
but
plantings. I'd sort of like
yeah.
to see what's gonna be there.
I mean, it's.
I will ask the
so-
architect to do, I mean, they do computer, you'd like to see an elevation on that side.
I'd like to see a northerly elevation with the absence of this whole big parking
I
area.
mean, you're right, the house is a self-imposed hardship to the way it was
Yeah,
built.
I mean, it
So,
really is a
but-
shame,
but-
and there were some beautiful trees on that site.
So John, there has to be an entranceway on Hedges, there's no.
Unless you change the address to Fairfield Pond,
Why can't we do that? Why can't they do that?
you can.
Yeah, but then they still have the problem of getting to the garage,
Yeah, fair enough.
which means that then they'd have to have a driveway come in from Fairfield and go around in front of that wall and back to the garage.
So. We're talking about this wall here.
I don't know where they put the entrance on.
I think that's
It's
that's
hedge
the,
dress anyway.
Yeah.
there's going to be an aerial hedge with.
Right,
What is the
extending
aerial
past,
hedge?
what's an aerial hedge? It's an extending from, it's a hedge.
No, it's not. What's an
What's an
aerial
aerial
hedge? Is it hanging upside down from the air
I think
on a
it's-
skyhook?
I will find out.
I think it's like raised,
I don't know what that is.
raised.
Oh, raised up.
Yeah.
Oh, I don't like that. You go up on top of a wall or something?
So, okay, so so putting a entrance into on the west side of the property to the garage makes somewhat more sense. Getting rid of that
Yeah,
whole
you know what,
mess.
there's
Yeah.
very,
Yeah.
I actually am welcoming this feedback.
We're more
Because
aligned
when
with
they
the.
contacted me, I couldn't understand why we couldn't just go here, alright? Then I went to look at the house and
I can't believe the AHRB thinks this is okay.
I don't, I'd like to understand their thinking when I.
so
I-
if we could adjourn for all purposes, I will discuss.
Yeah, like I said,
things
I don't wanna
with
hold
the-
up, listen, I went to visit the site, I actually met the builder at the site, and I'm sure the applicant's anxious to get the house done and in, which they probably hoped they would have by Memorial Day, which is out of the question. They'll be lucky if they're in by July 4th, so we're not holding anything
No,
up.
no, no, I'm going to speak to them about an entrance, and
Yeah.
I mean, if. They may be better off by changing the address to Fairfield, I mean, I can speak to you about how to, you know, I think it's a matter.
Well, then you have the driveway going.
No, no,
across.
I understand that, but they would still have to access the garage, and you don't want to have, let's.
Wait, but changing the address to Fairfield doesn't help.
Yeah, she.
I mean, they're gonna need 2 driveway cuts, so basically at this juncture, I think we're
Because
talking,
the garage
what
is on
works the
opposite
best
side
here.
from the front door.
In my opinion, what works best is to have a driveway that's And with
With
in a
conforming
conforming area
parking.
parking, okay?
And a
That's it,
separate
it doesn't
entrance.
There's a separate entrance and it goes to the.
Right, simple, straight
So-
down.
Yeah, but then you don't have to change the address if you have a
Yeah,
separate.
so-
address.
That was my point.
So let me speak to the owner. I mean, as I said, I was just brought in. I was not at the ARB. I don't know. I kept asking him, this doesn't make any sense. I did go and look at the facade of the building. It's there. So
Yeah,
I have,
exactly.
we have to work around it, and I will certainly take the comments back. I don't know what happened with the AHRB, or, you know.
We're
the
very
architect.
sensitive to the frontage on Hedges Lane,
Okay.
and to
Yeah.
that it looks and it conforms to the other houses on
I
it.
mean, I can't control the aesthetics of that wall, which is ugly, it's with, you know, maybe they can screen that or landscape that, but we certainly don't like the parking lot.
The
in the front.
AHRB.
Or the
house
aerial
will-
hedges.
Well, they have a 6 foot privet all along, all around the whole area.
Anyway,
So look, obviously, we're willing to work with you, I think we're more aligned with the applicant than.
yeah,
just
let
being
me
presented.
speak to the applicant and the architect, let's see what we can do remedially.
Yeah.
As a landscape architect, certainly,
Okay.
and I'll take the comments back.
And I am willing to stand corrected if I am incorrect about, I mean, Chris is still on. I assume, about the jurisdiction of the AHRB. I don't think that we're bound by what they want. And usually, you know, they exercise reasonable judgment that's protective of historic structures. But I said, this isn't an historic district, and it's not a rational configuration with all that driveway around there. So I would, if there are minutes, or I'd like to understand what were they thinking before I just willfully say I'm gonna disregard what they want.
Yeah, I think asking them for a letter, which we've done before, either a recommendation letter or something explaining what happened in their prior proceedings would be helpful.
Yeah, all right, thanks. Appreciate
Thank you.
your working with
On
us.
this one, so.
Then it may be moved from us, we may not need to grant a variance if they reconfigure it that way.
Still on.
Then you can just put it in, right, John?
Yeah,
But
okay.
then it still has to pass some sort of AHRB.
Yeah, as long as
No.
it's checklist.
No, the AHRB makes their recommendation. and-
I mean, of what the front looks like and everything, that's correct.
The AHRB recommendation would necessitate a variance, which we are not excited about having to grant. So
Technically, you
they are
can
better off-
withdraw your application and just say you're gonna put your parking, put 2 curb cuts in and put your parking, correct, John?
We were concerned about whether there would be an uproar.
Well, you-
But at this juncture, since we're all here, let me go back
Yeah,
so that it's all done above board. They may have reasons, and we can all consider, as I said.
That is totally unacceptable.
well, the applicant may have come with this variance application because they wanted to mollify the AHRB, thinking that if we got, that if they didn't, then there would be opposition to what they were doing. But I think in this particular case, and I think it's the first time that I can recall, where I think that the AHRB's recommendation is wrong-headed.
Well, what about the last one?
No, it's not the first.
Which one? Oh, well, yeah, maybe there were a bit others, but this one is, okay. Enough said. Thank you very
Thank
much.
you.
Sorry to keep you late
Oh,
on
no, no.
Friday. That was the final item of business for today's meeting, so we will continue this hearing till I take a motion.
Make a
to
motion to continue.
Continue the Stainer application to the
101 Hedges.
meeting. Yeah, okay, second, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye, and then I'll entertain a motion to adjourn the meeting. Moved, second, all in favor,
Aye.
meeting adjourned. Off the record. Thank you.
We
What
are
are we
too.
living today?
Yeah, we're off the record.
No, but it's
Don't
this
drink coffee
one.
before you come into this. You gotta lay off that if you have a cup, I'm just saying.
And which,
Don't drink any coffee
oh,
before you come into the
I'm
meeting.
too intense?
You're very intense tonight.
That's my nature.
That's because he missed the last one.
I would actually do my size.
Yeah. And you know, I was there before, I mean,
These guys are.
and it's an important corner, it's a
Yeah.
really
Yeah.
important.
It's an
corner.
open corner.
These guys have been in a meeting next to.
The building itself.
Huh? Yeah, that too.
I don't know, I didn't understand anything about this, why they put the entrance around there, the garage